I want to welcome you back to our series through the Beatitudes, understanding our vast fortune as God's people. Over the last few weeks, what we've seen is Jesus addressing his disciples concerning what it means to live like a good kingdom citizen. And we've asked a few questions. We've asked, what is our relationship with God like? We've asked, what are some attitudes that we need to adopt as kingdom citizens? And we've also asked, why is it so good to be a Christian? And we've begun to get a few answers. The first answer we saw is that God looks at our sin and he desires to save us. Those who are poor in spirit, God is drawn near to. Then last week we saw that our God comforts us who mourn. Our God draws near and brings comfort to us when we are broken over our own sin. And we learned that we ought to be a people who mourn and are broken over our sin. And we've seen that we are a very fortunate people because we have a God who draws near in comfort. We've been looking at this theme of why are we fortunate to be God's people. And today, I want to turn your attention to the next Beatitude. The next Beatitude is found in Matthew chapter 5, verse 5, and it deals with situations around us. It focuses on our response to unfavorable circumstances. You know, we can often tend to manipulate the circumstances around us in order to achieve our own outcome. When we feel used or abused, we try to get back at people, or we become bitter. You know, sometimes we're trying to make sure that everything works out according to our plan. So here's the question. How do we relate to circumstances that are around us? What happens if a circumstance is unfavorable? How do we deal with situations that are outside of our control? And here's what the third Beatitude says. God provides for those of us who are meek. In Matthew 5, verse 5, Jesus says this, "Blessed are the meek, for they shall inherit the earth." Now, often we hear the word meek and we think of somebody who is weak, someone who's fragile. But one author describes meekness this way. He says, meekness comes not from cowardice or passivity, but rather from trusting God and therefore being set free from anxious self-promotion. You see, somebody who is meek is not passive, is not dispassionate, but somebody who is meek daily trusts God, and he or she lives with a settled trust, knowing that God is in control. It's somebody who lives like God is in control. And the ultimate meek person was Jesus. For instance, in Matthew 11, verse 29, Jesus says, "Take my yoke upon you, and learn of me, for I am meek and lowly in heart." Or Matthew 21:5 says, "Tell ye the daughters of Zion, behold, thy king cometh unto thee, meek, and sitting upon a donkey." Meekness is not a failure to stand up for truth. Meekness is a gentle, controlled spirit that lives rested under the sovereign hand of God. We fail to be meek because we fail to trust our God. The reason why so many of us are not meek or subtly controlled is because we don't trust our God. When we fail to trust our God, here's what happens. We can seek to get our own way, or we can be harsh. We can be very easily provoked. We can be people who, when we're provoked, we're very quick to be angry. Someone who is meek lives daily trusting in their God. And as I said before, it doesn't mean that they're passive, and it doesn't mean that they're dispassionate about things. It's somebody who recognizes that God is in control and orders his or her life accordingly. But how does God respond to somebody who is meek? How does God look to somebody who has this settled trust in him? He says, "For they shall inherit the earth." You know, this is a huge contrast for the world's way of thinking. For instance, the world says, if you take everything into your hands, you're going to make life work. They say that you're going to make life work when you force things to go the way that you want, when you stand up for yourself or live for number one. But here's what God says. God says, "Seek me first, seek my kingdom first, and everything else will be added to you, and I will take care of everything." You know, this phrase, "for they shall inherit the earth," refers to the fact that us as Christians, we will inherit the new heaven and the new earth. those of us who live daily trusting in God, He will provide, definitely in the future, but also now. If you joined us for our Isaiah study, I said that one way that we can wait on God or even live meekly is by expecting God to work in the future, but also now. And somebody who is meek lives expecting God to work. So, what worries or what fears do you face day by day that cause you not to trust God? Perhaps you're worried about different family circumstances or different issues that are going on with relationships you have in life. Perhaps you're outraged daily at the chaos that you see in our world. You seemingly look at things and think that everything's going out of control. Our God knows that we have anxieties. And what He says is, seek Him first. He tells us to live meekly, and He will take care of the rest. So, are you living for your concerns and your needs and forcing life to fit into your box? Or are you trusting God to take care of everything? For those of you who are still in school, or for those of you who have gone through any form of education, you know that group projects are not very fun. I want you to imagine that you're in a group project, whether at school or even at work, and you are in a group project with a straight-A student. Now, let's say that you're in this project and you're really worried about whether or not that person's going to get all of his work done. So what you do is you take all of your time and you use it to do the work that he is supposed to do. On the due date that either your project or your school assignment is due, you go up to your group and you say, you know what, I did all of his work, but I didn't do any of mine. And that straight-A student looks at you and says, why did you do that? I finished all of my work, just like my character is to do. You see, when we don't trust God, we almost try to do His work. We say, God, you're not going to take care of this, so I'm going to take care of this. When we fail to live meekly, we play God. We take into our own hands what He already promises to do for us. This is called being prideful. It's called trying to control things that are not our job to control. Instead, when we adopt a meek attitude, we rest in the fact that God takes care of all things in our life. And then we're free. We're free to love God and to seek first His kingdom and to love others and to fulfill what God has called us to do. So you and I are very fortunate to be God's people because He provides for those who are meek. I do want to thank you for joining me again this week. I've enjoyed doing these studies with you, and I look forward to seeing you again next Tuesday.